Hello, everyone. Welcome to Psychology and Spirituality, a bridge to better life discussion. I'm here today with Bea Lopes, who comes back to our program. Hi, Bea. How are you doing?
Good. How are you? I'm so excited to be here today with you.
Thank you. I likewise, I'm so excited to have you here. And Bea, just to give you a little bit of context in today's topic, right? We are in the middle of a series, if you will, of discussions on the many faceted, the quite complex topic of grief and loss. But today, specifically, I'd love to hear you talk and explore this theme, which is how many of us adults we experience loss and grief, but few of us take the time to explore or even openly discuss it. As we can think about it, this time is perhaps a moment in life when we, at a minimum, we start to face the many multiple opportunities and possibilities in our lives as we close the chapter of, say, adolescence and even young adulthood. But those possibilities start to really change into the world of consequences. So if you think about it, Bia, when youth, and I heard you speak about youth and that special that transition, so I'd love to hear you talk about it to us. But when youth once felt like this, oh, beautiful open horizon, and then adulthood begins to feel like maybe this new landscape, and it's no longer so open, right? But it's a landscape that is shaped by decisions, responsibilities, new professions, new name, new locations, new jobs, new life, right? But it may also be populated by loss, many different losses. So if I think about Carl Gustav Jung, right, the Swiss psychologist, he suggested, and I love that more than you can ever imagine, and he has even models about it that I often quote. I'm not going to do this today, but he suggests that the first half of life is devoted to developing, to building our personality, right? And while we accomplish that in the first part of our lives, the second half is about really discovering our authentic self. And by that, he means the deeper self beyond those roles, beyond those masks, beyond those personas. So, Bia, for us today, I would love if we can leverage the spiritual psychology of Joanna de Ângelis. And with that, let's frame the discussion on adulthood, not just this biological stage, okay, 25, I don't know, to 60, whatever that time frame we call before we say old age, right? But it's beyond that biological time frame. And let's think of it as a time when we embark in the school of consciousness. And I say that on purpose because Joanna de Angelis loves the topic of consciousness and consciousness expansion. But in that school, grief is often our teacher. And it's as hard as it is to talk about it. I would like for us to explore not only the aspects of grief, aspects of loss in our adulthood, in our lives, when often we see ourselves confronted with the idea that loss may be about the absence, right? The what disappears, and that includes our life that we chose, right? There is this disappearing act, if you will, of a life that I once had and the life that I choose. And what does it mean when I lose that? But Bia, thank you so much for being here. Shall we explore those many layers of grief?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And right from the beginning, thinking about this topic and the phrase crossroads of the heart, and
Yes.
that really impacted me because I totally know what you're talking about with all these transitions as I'm approaching 27 years old and I've recently been encountering a lot of these transitions into adulthood, like moving to a new state, getting a new corporate job, getting married, and all of these transitions, moving away from my friends, like all of that's happening. And it really is this crossroad of the hearts because there's a lot of exciting things, right? Like the list that I just mentioned, those are all really exciting things that I'm like so happy for. But with that comes these things that you're letting go or these things that you're moving on from. So it's difficult because while there's new and exciting things, you're also leaving some things behind. While you're starting a new chapter, you're closing some chapters that
Yeah.
already exist. And so it's this back and forth, and that's why it's a crossroads. It's like all of it coming together because yeah, it's positive and it seems exciting, but it's also challenging, and there's also like a lot of difficulties and loss
Do you know
that
what it
comes
comes
with
to my
that
mind?
moment. Yeah.
And sorry to interrupt, but what came
No,
to my
good.
mind is sometimes maybe I don't know, a TV series or a book, and I've been through that where you're in the middle of a book and you are in the chapter and the chapter goes so well and you can see there's one page left and we're wrapping up the chapter and like no, I don't want it to end.
Yes.
It can even be a movie, not a movie, but a dream, right? You're in the middle of the dream like no, 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 I want to go back to the dream. And I think when you say the exciting nature of moving on from to, it is interesting that, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting transformation, and I think like all your time growing up as a youth, you always want to be older, right? Like as a little
Yeah.
kid, you want to be the teenager, and then as a teenager, you want to be like the young adult, the college student, and you're always wanting to move forward. But then you get to a point again, and you're still excited about all these things, but you're realizing all the things that got left behind in that process, and and those transitions, right, of like what was your personality in high school
Mm,
or as a teenager to then what is your personality in college, and now you're merging into this adult world, and what does that mean for your personality, for who you are, for what your life is shaped as. And
mhm.
it's really interesting to think about, right? You want all this freedom and you get the freedom. Suddenly, like you can do whatever you want, but
Yeah.
then the consequences start coming too, right? Like I've even noticed I can't eat a ton of junk food anymore because or else it's not going to sit with me well. But it's a thing as a kid of like, oh, when I'm an adult, I'm just going to eat candy all day, right? And then you get to being adult, it's like, I could do that, but it's gonna come with some
I
consequences.
I often think I'm much older than you are, Bea, but I often think of that. Oh, those are good old days when you could
Yes,
eat whatever, and
right.
now no, not at all. Not even a glimpse of let's just no, let's not
No.
go there.
Exactly. Yeah, so little things and little transitions, and um I was actually listening to a book the other day that was talking about how once you transition into adulthood, a lot of things that you took for granted, you suddenly
Mhm.
have to become a lot more intentional about. So, right,
Yes.
growing up in school, you're always with peers who are going through the same process as you. You're all hitting the same milestones. You're graduating the same classes. And while you have some choices there, right, if you're going to choose to do a sport or choose to get this job, you're all going through the same path. And
Mhm.
so there's a few variations, but you're on the same path. You have peers that are doing the same thing with you. Suddenly, it's like after college, everyone scatters to their own way, right? Some people move to some towns and some people move to others and get certain types of jobs and have different lifestyles. And so suddenly, all those things that kind of took for granted that those people were always around you, suddenly now you have to be a lot more intentional about it. Those people
Mhm.
aren't just always there. You have to reach out, or maybe the interests don't align anymore. So there's a lot of this change um that happens with unannounced, right? It's not
Yes.
something that oh, okay, so tomorrow it's going to be completely different. No, it just happens unannounced, and suddenly you look back and say, wow, my life is completely different than it was a few years ago.
And to that idea of silent, unannounced change. And I love, I wasn't thinking at all about the simultaneous, the ease. And I know this is a bad thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. The herd mentality, right? Where we're
Yeah.
all moving at the same pace, but it's quite comforting when something doesn't feel quite right. And I just have to look to one side, to the other, and I have a peer perhaps going through the same thing. And in that sense, there's comfort. There is even a sense of normalcy. This is okay. But that scattering is a phenomenon that most of us go
Mhm.
through, right? In fact, you could say, and I'm quite puzzled by this, not part of our subject today, but I'm quite puzzled by the fact when you said you had to move to a new city, a new job, and how do you transition to the new job, good if you're prepared, et cetera, but the emotional bonds that you had with your old job, how do you manage that? Or in a more subtle way, how do you identify yourself? Right?
Yeah.
How do you see yourself? Are you still the whatever the job A was? I don't know, and it can go upward, lateral, or downward. In fact, right? Let's pretend I was a VP here, and now today I am, I don't know, a coordinator. I'm just kidding here,
Mhm.
everyone, but several layers of going down intentionally,
Mhm.
right? But how do we manage that self identification, that persona, that masks that Jung was talking about as the first half of our lives,
Yeah.
built carefully, intentionally? But how do you do when you transition, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's really interesting, this concept of the collapse of your persona, right? So this
Yeah,
concept that the things that were defining you that you were going with, suddenly they're all different. And this even starts like going into college. I remember like in high school, I was like,
yeah,
okay, I'm one of the smart kids in class and I get the good grades, right? Then I go to college and I'm looking around my class and everyone is saying that they were the smart kid. And so suddenly you're like, oh, well, now it's different, now it's
yeah,
not as easy. And then you go into your corporate job, and it's like, actually, that persona doesn't really matter much at all because here it's about your experience and what you've been through and
yeah,
what you know now. So it's like these personas that at certain points in our life feel so relevant. And the same thing
yeah,
for people who are athletes, right? You're
yeah,
such an athlete as in your teenage years, you maybe even bring it into college years, but after that it starts to fade out and you're now trying to rediscover, like, okay, what is my personality, my persona, who am I, what do I want to be perceived as, right? Who do I want to
yeah.
be? And so
What
you
is my
kind of
legacy, right? What is my
right.
legacy? What and I don't know the name of the movie. I will remember, but it's an interesting it's satirical in many ways, but quite sad as the aspect of it, and it's about this the jock, right? The quarterback in this high school,
Mhm.
and he was the fantasy. This was really the most amazing, good looking, the one that everybody aspired to be like, and the cheerleader, the queen of the prom. I mean, she was
Mhm.
beautiful, and they get married. So fast forward 20 years later, and both of them are dealing with no longer, and I'm going to use your word, right? They're no longer relevant.
Yeah.
It's not even that you have to transition. It's not even relevant. So
Hmm.
what? Cheerleader, who cares, right? So I think it
Exactly. Yeah.
just came as a faded memory of this movie, and how disheartening it is, the sense of disillusionment from no longer being 100% what you built so carefully, egoically speaking, right? You
Yeah.
you create that persona, and the persona is an image. It is an illusion. It is just
Hmm.
something that goes away. But I
Yeah.
love your thoughts in
Thank
that
you.
aspect. Yeah,
Yeah, and to your point too of like of my experience actually moving to a new state. And so I moved from New York to Connecticut. So right next to each other, not too far, but
yeah,
just enough that I'm like 2 hours from my family and friends.
yeah,
And moving those that little bit of a distance, right? One thing I noticed is that when I moved to Connecticut, I was trying so hard to still have my same life in New York. So my
yeah,
friends are in New York, my family are in New York. So I was like, okay, no, I'll go, every weekend, all the time I was going there. And I was, this persona was collapsing. Like this persona of
yeah,
me living in New York was collapsing, but I didn't want to admit it. So I was like really straining myself to try and be at everything in New York while also trying to build a new life in Connecticut.
yeah,
And until about a year ago, I went through this moment that I said, no, like I have to let that go. Like
yeah.
I have to be intentional about living my life in Connecticut and building my roots and building my life here now. And that
Hmm.
doesn't mean I have to say goodbye to everyone, right? I still go there all the time, but being more intentional about that. And it was challenging. Like to me, it felt like a loss. Like it felt like a loss to go through that moment saying, like, I can't be with my friends all the time. I can't be doing the same things they are. I can't be with my family all the time. Like, I
Yeah,
need to create something new. So it did feel like a loss and really hard. But I will say now, with that shift of my mindset, it's been a lot easier to be okay with this is what I'm doing here. Let me try and do things where I am. And then still, every once in a while, be intentional about going to New York and seeing those people, right? It's not about completely getting rid of that aspect of my life, but redefining myself because trying to do both was not working out at all.
and how did you do? Can you maybe give us a, not that we want to pry into your personal life, but
Yeah.
tell us how was it, how difficult was it? You already mentioned, but what are some of the tools, if you will, that helps us moving? Because the sense of loss is real, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I could say I was thinking about it. 2 hours from your family, Bia, I am 24 hours and this isn't a good day for my family. Come on, step out of it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, 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 no. Choices and choices, right? I chose to move away from the
Yeah.
family many, many years ago. It seems like lifetimes ago. And it's okay. Here, so many decades later, I forged a new life like you are right now, 2 hours away from your home in New York.
Yeah, and that's where it's like everyone has their path, right? So of course, I can't even imagine being, right, like 24 hours away, but then people have to experience that as well. And like now there's
Yeah,
not even like for me for a while in that pretending stage, I was going
yeah,
back to New York all the time. But
yeah.
if you're 24 hours, if you do that move further away, now you can't even pretend. You can't even
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like I think you might get to that kind of realization, but I will say the biggest thing for me was admitting to myself that that was happening
I
because right
see.
for a while I'm like blindly living through that trying to make everything work out and
Yeah.
I remember it came to this one day, this one event that I couldn't be at. I was like, I just can't make it there.
Yeah.
After work and in between things, I can't make it there. And missing that, I felt so upset to miss that. And then I said, but how am I going to keep living this way,
Yes. Yes.
being able to make, right? I wish one of my biggest things, if I had a superpower, would probably be to like teleportation, like to get there quickly. But I don't have that. So it's like I
Not
have to
yet.
be, not yet. So I have to be realistic, and and that's like where I was honest with myself. And I think that's the first step. A lot of times we're just holding on to that thing, right? We're holding on to that thing we did in high school that was amazing, or that thing that persona that we had in high school that we really wanted. Like we're holding on to that, but it has to
Mhm.
come from us realizing, okay, maybe that's not reality right now. Maybe
Yeah.
that's not, that was great while it lasted, but that's not right now. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean, right, like right now I can build something amazing as well,
Yeah.
but it's just making that intentional shift. And it was hard when I came to that realization. It was really hard to say, okay, like nowadays they talk a lot about the fear of missing out, FOMO.
Yeah. Yeah.
and and it was that, right? I was like, okay, I'm just gonna have to start saying, if it doesn't fit my schedule, I have to say no to things. And that was really hard, but getting through it, now I'm feeling a lot more comfortable. And okay, there's certain things I can attend, there's certain things I can't, but being intentional and more mindful of it.
Yeah,
Um,
can I
yeah,
shift the
yeah,
conversation
absolutely.
to something, because you came in with the loss of a lifestyle, and even the peers, right? But
Mhm.
maybe in jest, we're going to talk. Let's talk a little bit about adulting,
Yeah,
right? And adulting is really becoming this. Embracing adulthood, which you are beautifully so, if I may
thank,
say, but
thank you.
it also, there's some maybe a sense of dread beyond that social aspect of your life. And this is what I was thinking. Boy, we have responsibilities, right? We have
Yeah.
bills to pay. We have a job that you have to be there on time and perform. There are other types of decisions that you have to make. In your case, you mentioned that you moved. What house do you want? How much debt or not you want to
Mhm.
incur, right? What about if you want to have children, no children, if you have this type of adult life preference? Do you are you in a place right now that you choose to care for others, etc.? All of this usually comes in the package of I'm an adult. But
Yeah.
adulting, there is several aspects that I wanted to maybe share with you, which
Mhm.
is for I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But from a psychological perspective, we could say that adulting is all about maturity, right? So emotional maturity, your identity, which you talked about, and what intentional, but also how do I see myself as, and self-awareness, my choices, and that self-awareness is really coming to terms. Yes, I could be upset all day every day for the rest of my life, or right, I could come to terms and say no, I choose this versus that. Uh, a different aspect of the so-called, and I'm putting here air quotes, right, of this
Mhm.
adulting could be, from a spiritual perspective, be the idea of our moral responsibility, right? That sense of I am self-aware. I'm an adult, and I know my moral. And I'm putting my hand toward up, right, my true north, my sense of my moral compass, but also what about my from a spiritual perspective, what are the aspects that I still need to develop? And even I'm now thinking of Jung, how do I transcend the traps of ego, and remembering that a strong ego is important, right, for our personality. So, but how do you transcend those egoic mechanism of creating a persona, creating those roles for you to be successful? And then, in addition to that, I would say perhaps from a material perspective, which I already alluded, right? There are so many responsibility, financial responsibility, professional commitments, your health you already mentioned, family, right? If you have a family, you have a spouse, what does this mean? So it's almost this multidimensional
Mhm.
aspect of a being. And if we go back to that idea of from possibility to commitment, right, and
Yeah.
the sense of loss, maybe, and I just want to punt it to you here, while youth may, and this is me thinking out loud here, right, may mean exploration, an identity that's still very fluid, experimentation. Now you pivot to, okay, I'm an adult, and you use the word intentional, which I love it,
Mhm.
which means commitment, which means
Yeah.
direction or responsibility. How do we talk about all of this and the reality of having to face with loss in a difficult way, or more embracing loss in a way that is positive for all of us.
Yeah, yeah, and one word that you said that stuck out to me a lot from the beginning is consciousness, right? And
Yeah,
now we have
yeah,
that consciousness because we have, right, in childhood, you have these guardrails, you have these people helping you, that
yeah,
they're guiding you along the path. So you can make
yeah,
some mistakes, yeah, you're gonna learn, but there's guardrails there. And now you get to adulthood and it's kind of like, okay, you're on your own now. And
yeah,
that's great. And again, right, that's that sense of like that freedom. But then there's
yeah.
the responsibilities. And as you're mentioning, it comes to your being open, your consciousness of thinking, I can do whatever I want right now, but what's the best thing to do? What's the right thing to do?
Hmm.
Right? And then you get a job and you're dedicated to that job, but now, okay, now with your money, how are you going to be responsible? How are you going to
Yeah,
spend your free time? Right? What do
yes.
you want, as we said, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be known as? And all of these things that you're trying to redefine. And it's this moment of, right, expanding your consciousness and being conscious about what you're doing, intentional about what you're doing,
Hmm.
um, with of course all of these changes and transitions happening. So
Hmm.
easier to say than to do, but
Yeah,
but yeah, I think it's this being conscious about and realizing that we're still learning, right? Like this,
yes.
it's almost like all of this childhood and young adult era was setting us up for the real challenges of life, right?
Yeah,
It was kind of
yeah.
setting us up. So now here we are. Now it's like, okay, now you're going to get the real trials. So even if we're trying to get to the best position, to have everything perfect, right? There's always going to
Mhm.
be a challenge that comes up because
Yeah.
that's why we're here. We're here to keep learning. And you can imagine all of our earthly trials are not during childhood, right? They're going
Yeah,
to come
yeah,
up in that era of adulthood because when we're adults, now we have those tools that we need. We have the consciousness, and now it's up to us to overcome those challenges. So it's never going to be that perfect state. And I think that's a difficult thing that when you look at social media and just
mm,
media in general, there's this concept of, okay, I'm going to graduate college or I'm going to go into the workforce and everything's going to be perfect. I'm going to have my life figured out.
yeah,
But the truth is, majority of young adults, of people in their 20s, they're figuring it out. I remember at the end of college, me and all of my peers trying to get jobs, and it's like you don't suddenly have a job lined up, and it's a
yeah.
lot harder than it makes it seem. So I think being aware of, it's going to be challenging and we're getting through this, but right, trying to be responsible, trying to take action intentional where you can, but knowing that there will definitely be challenges and trials, and that's not going away.
Yeah, the thought that came to my mind is approaching life with humility, right?
Yeah,
Because I love when you when you start to say about, "Ooh, I was a smart one in my classroom, in my school," and ooh, now all of us are the smart ones. Therefore, I'm no longer differentiated by my intelligence, and then both you lose relevance, at all.
yeah,
If there's anything at all that made me feel special, it's no longer in this new environment where people may have 40 years ahead of you in that corporate environment. So I
yeah,
think it's very interesting if you think about it, that shift.
mhm,
And as I said, the word that came to my mind was humility. With humility, we are better able to navigate from one environment, this social experiment that is life itself, right? From one to the next cycle to the next in a way that is a learning experience
yeah.
versus I'm trying to prove something that I may not have any way, shape, or form to prove. Right?
Yeah, and one concept that when I was thinking about this topic that came to mind and I really liked is reorientation instead of restoration, because a
Mm,
lot of people live onto this hope that, okay,
yeah,
maybe I can get it to the point that I'm going to rebuild what I had before.
yeah,
But it's
yeah.
saying it's not about rebuilding what you have or getting to that same situation, because again, that whole smart kid in the class thing, it only matters when you're in school. After that, it's like
Exactly.
it
Uh-huh.
doesn't matter. So it's like, or like we were saying, the athlete or whatever that personality was, it was there, and us doing good, it's not about restore, we're not going to get back to that state, right? We're not going to restore what was previously there. How do we reorient ourselves and get
Yeah.
ourselves on a new path? Like, okay, what do I want my story to be from now on, instead of always trying to get back to that place that was really good in the past.
Yeah, yeah, love that. So from a past as these amazing possibilities, right? Into, and I see yourself at the beginning of adulthood. I'm further, way further along. And I have to tell you, if I may say, and you're gonna say, my Marcia, don't say that. The best is yet to happen to you. If I take my own life as an example. The best is yet to come. So hang in there.
That's good to know.
Life,
That's
yeah,
good to know.
life is an amazing from that sense. But the possibilities, when we think about life unfolding, then we start to see new job, new career, and the career gets defined, and a path, that career path, start to make sense, right?
Hmm.
It begins to stabilize your new relationships, and we're talking about partner, children, family, friends, whatever, right? Co-workers, whatever those the new environmental network that appears to you. Those relationships have a chance to flourish, to deepen, even when responsibilities grow, right, Bia?
Yeah.
So I think it's a, to me, grief at this stage, grief and loss at this stage is it's a matter of understanding that for each choice that I take, I have a million plus choices that I didn't.
Hmm. Right.
And so I believe there's a this economist sense of path dependence, right?
Mhm.
Once you take one step this direction, um, it's easier for you to continue than to change it again. So it's almost this very bittersweet, if you will,
Yeah.
idea that comes with as we narrow our possibilities, we also invite our lives to transition in a almost organic way, right? To unfold in a very beautiful path that is life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I liked what you said about the responsibility, right? Because the responsibility becomes our for our love and our compassion towards our loved ones, because it
Mhm,
turns less from, okay, I'm just gonna give affection, which is still of course amazing, but it's more like, oh, I'm gonna care for this person in my family. I'm
mhm,
gonna
mhm,
to do certain tasks for this person, right? And that responsibility comes in multiple layers to
mhm,
support your life. um,
mhm.
but also, yeah, what you're saying of the choices you make are definitely feel a lot more permanent when
Yeah,
they're adult choices, right? When you're in childhood, your choices are smaller, and usually if you go down a
yeah,
wrong path, there's an easy way to pull you back.
yeah,
But this, not saying that if you go down a wrong path, that, you can always work your way out, but it could be a harder challenge, right? Like, and we're talking about someone moving across the country. If they don't really like it, there's always coming back, but it's a
yeah,
bigger challenge to come back,
yeah,
right? It
yeah,
feels more permanent to make those decisions, and yeah, all the steps that lead us, right? Like what we choose to study in school, but then also what career you go into that might be nothing what you studied in school, and
yeah,
where all those steps lead you in life. So it feels like there's a lot of pressure on those choices that we make, especially when you're just starting adulthood, because it feels like, okay, where I go now, is that where I'm going to live for the rest of my life, for
yeah,
20 years, right?
yeah,
There's big choices that you have to make, but I think
yeah,
knowing, right, we'll always be able to find new paths within those choices.
yeah, yeah. So that path dependence in a very material aspect. This is an economic concept, right?
Uh,
Think about, we can all imagine here when we start to make an investment, and that investment can be financial investment, but it could also be the energy that we invest in our education, right?
Mhm.
Our relationships, but also a path of experience. So you mentioned earlier the athletes, and yes, I'm no longer the Olympian that I dream to be, but what does it mean? How can I perhaps continue that path in a reorienting, like you said, right?
Mhm.
Reorienting in a way that makes sense to me. What are the systems, perhaps I'm thinking systems as frameworks, right? What are
Yeah.
the systems that I can make it happen, to organize myself around so that those choices are they don't compete like Connecticut, New York, but how can I make those choices and create a definitions and frameworks that will support my decisions, and switching paths become very costly, as
Yeah.
in if
Yeah.
you are in a I don't know if you've ever done kayaking, right? I used to
Mhm.
kayak a lot, and if you close your eyes and kayak, whoo, you just can go directly toward the margin or a tree or whatever versus the right path.
Yeah.
So kayaking, like life, it's all about course correcting at
Yeah.
each and every one of our, how we move ourselves in that little tiny kayak. So I think it's important to see if we can extrapolate that with our idea of loss. Yes, every time we choose, we may undo what, 100, a million, a billion different choices, but there is gains when we continue to invest financially, socially, in our relationships, in those that were the the goal of our choices, right? So
Yeah.
if you think about it, and you mentioned career, if I am, I don't know, 20 years in engineering, I built an expertise, my reputation, a professional structure that all, you know, supports that. If I choose, which is still, I have free will to choose, and I'm going to change, and I'm going to, I don't know, give me a choice. The thought that came to my mind, I'm going to go to being a tourist guide
Uh,
in, I don't know, give me a country, somewhere in Indonesia. Never been to Indonesia, but I want to do that. And what's going to happen? I'm going to lose it all, and there will be a cost. I'm going to
mhm.
potentially lose my, most likely reputation. I'm going to lose my expertise, my financial gains. But isn't that sentiment that helps us better understand it's okay? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about the end of a lifetime. Those
Mhm.
choices are just choices. So long we understand that, right? So long we put from a psychological and spiritual perspective that there is no good, bad, or the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? There is no, this is the good option.
Mhm.
You can only do if you do this. No, you can have those a million and one choices, but it is what makes sense to you so that you
Yeah.
can achieve the best in your maturity, in your spiritual, psychological, physical maturity that you aim for.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that as I've entered adulthood, one thing I'm so curious about that I always ask is, talking to more mature adults, I'll say, how was your career path? What has your career path
Yeah,
been? How did you get here? And what I found is it's so interesting because everyone went on their own crazy journey, right? No
yeah,
one is like, I went from this to this, right up the ladder, right? No, everyone is like, well, I this crazy opportunity came up and I took that and I went lateral and I went down and I went here and like
yes,
everyone's path is so different. and then they get to a point that they are happy and where they're at. So it's like exactly what you're saying. There's millions of choices, but let's do what feels right in this moment, right? And keep on that path. And then I like
Yeah.
your example of the kayaking, right? Course correcting and keeping ourselves on the path. Because there's a lot of choices that we're gonna make that are gonna put us lead our lives, but how do we stay intentional, right, with everything we do, and figure out what value we want to add, what impact we want to have in our lives,
Hmm.
and just
Yeah.
keep trusting ourselves with that.
Yeah. What seems right to you in that moral compass? Because we may
Yeah,
have different, right?
yeah, right.
Different norths, unfortunately. And I think maybe as we approach to the end of our conversation today, there are many different losses during adulthood, right? And grief, you may say, oh, you lost a partner, you lost a
Hmm.
parent, etc. But it goes beyond the loss of someone through physical death.
Yeah.
We can say perhaps is the loss of freedom. You just got married, and some people may say, but I want to be free. Well, those, I want to be single. You are free, right? I want to be single, but those are irreconcilable decisions. You cannot be single and married at the same time.
Yeah,
Or you can choose this career and go like, but I really don't want to be here, I also want to be there. Those are things that is very important, and by choosing one versus the other, you, and I'm saying collectively, you and I, right, we may feel a sense of loss, a sense of even depression of, but I was so happy when I was this way, so let's pivot into why that made me
right.
happy and now it doesn't, right? So let's think
Yeah,
about how we go through unrecognizable or hidden aspects of loss, and be kind to ourselves, right, Bea? Be kind
yeah,
to ourselves on how
exactly.
we navigate through life.
And yeah, and I think there's this, especially during childhood, and then young adult years, there's
Mhm.
this kind of bubble that we live
Yeah,
in, right?
yeah,
There's this
yeah,
this bubble that we live in, that most things, right? And not saying that there are people who have plenty of issues in their childhood as well, but most of us are living in this bubble that is
yeah,
somehow contained. And in this adulthood, it's almost like the bubble's starting to pop, and you
yeah,
had to see the real world, because right, the one thing we didn't talk about a lot, but it's also the loss of loved ones in the physical sense.
yeah,
And because as we get older, the people around us get older as well.
yeah,
And so that
yeah,
becomes more concerns that we might not have been worrying about before, but now we are thinking about people around us passing away, and
yeah,
having to care for people getting sick, and even as we said, our own physical health. We thought it
yeah.
was invincible,
Oh
right?
yes.
Lived in this bubble. We lived in this bubble of everything. We're invincible. Nothing bad's going to happen to us. And then you start seeing the reality that, and it's not about, oh, this is just bad because everything's bad, right? But it's these
Uh-huh.
challenges and just the way of life that this is going to happen. So
Yeah.
as we get more years, we start to experiencing more of that. And I think it's really important um, to focus in on that and shift our mindsets from, oh, there's all these challenges, it's so everything's terrible and now I'm not going to do anything, right? We have to
Mhm.
shift our mindsets and seeing we're getting more challenges because we're stronger and we're more
Yes.
capable to face
Yes.
those challenges,
Yeah,
right? It's like,
absolutely. Yeah.
so we're getting to that point that we have, like you said, to have faith in ourselves and help ourselves, and really have that inner reflection with ourselves to say, okay, this is challenging, this is really hard, but how do I persevere? How do I keep getting through this?
What do I need to do
Yeah,
spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, physically, whatever facet may be,
yeah,
because we are challenged. You're right on the you hit the nail on the head. We get bigger challenges because we are bigger,
yeah.
right? We are bigger in the sense of more mature. This is beautiful. We are almost at time. So, Bia, anything else that you'd like to bring here before we close our conversation?
No, thank you. Yeah, this has been a great conversation and definitely something that I'm still working on and going through these transitions. So it's great to talk about. And I think, as we mentioned, right, just shifting our mindset and
Yeah,
realizing that there's all these change, right? And there's going to be those pros and cons. We're going to take a step, make a choice that we have a list of pros, but there is a list of cons. And
yeah,
being mindful and considerate and saying, okay, I am choosing this and I know there's these cons and that's going to feel like a loss and it's going to hurt, but what are the positives? How am I moving on from moving forward from this, and how do I be intentional with who I want to be, what value do I want to add, and letting go of some of those, the value we might have added as teenagers, as young adults, but who do we want to be now?
yes, yes. The image that came to my mind is it's amazing to see somebody as a student, but let's pretend that you are a student and you finish the school and go to another career, not career, a student path, right? So,
Mhm.
and then you finish 5 years later and you do another one and you finish. So you're forever student. And it is a path if you have done that, but we start to see, and this is a almost natural, right, response. Like, come on, get started. You fulfill your life. You know enough. Get out there. So failing to launch may be just that, failing to realize that we're strong enough as we are to this new
Yeah,
cycle. Yeah.
yeah,
But
and there's this.
anyways, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's this quote that I really like that says, "A problem only becomes difficult when you suppose it is hard." So it's just
Yeah,
shifting that mindset, right? Because we know that problem is hard. We know there's a problem. We know it's hard. But when we give into that, when we let ourselves succumb to, oh my God, it's hard and I'm never going to be able to overcome it, it gets so challenging. But when we think, no, it's okay, it's a problem, but I can get through it, that
yeah,
really makes a
yeah.
huge difference.
Can I say something to that? Because my
Yeah.
professional life is project, program, portfolio management, and whatever you are, let's pretend project, and it can be any small or large project. The key to success is break it down into smaller chunks.
Yes.
Every single problem, even if you think in the 60s or 50s and 60s, right? It was leading with NASA going to the moon, it enormous, so many people, but they had to keep breaking down that
Mm-hmm.
goal into feasible steps. So that's all it
Absolutely.
is. I love it.
Absolutely. Yes,
But
absolutely.
anyways, we are at time. I love to continue talking to you, Bia. Thank you so very much. And my thoughts as we say goodbye is that yes, adulthood is often misunderstood, but spiritually it is something quite interesting, right? Because it's the time when perhaps we're moving away from living an illusion, right? Those personas, the cheerleader or the prom queen, the best in class, the most intelligent. Those were temporary roles that become an illusion as we keep moving forward. So when we talk about perhaps this topic here today, grief and loss in adulthood, it's not about, as Bia mentioned, it's not about restoration of recovering what was lost, but reclaim, move beyond, reorient yourself so that it is here within our soul that we learn, right? So, from that perspective, we learn that love is an emotion, but much beyond that, it is, and Bia, you mentioned that, is a responsibility. So, let us all awaken in us, in our adulthoods, the comfort that it brings to be able to love and be responsible for someone or something. But everyone, if this is the first time you are here with us today, I appreciate you. And our program, the Psychology and Spirituality Weekly Talks, are based on the works by Joanna de Ângelis. And I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. And please share with your friends, if you are part of a, say, Spiritist center, let them know that we're talking about psychology and spiritual psychology in a way that is very relatable. It's our stories, right, Bia? But
Yeah.
I also want to thank our sponsors, the Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil. I always like to say what it is because you may not know, but it is the Brazilian chapter, the Brazilian arm of the Medical Spiritist Association. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so long, everyone.
Thank you.